So, I don't know about you, but I'm actually kind of sick of people telling me what the latest must-read book must be, because quite frankly, I find the majority of them have bad taste. I mean, I'm being facetious, but also kind of true. Taste is subjective, I know, I'm just doing it for dramatic effect, okay? But the books people have been recommending me for years now have been utter drivel, in my opinion. I just feel like I can't trust any book recommendations that I'm given, from esteemed book prizes like the Man Booker to even recommendations from fellow readers, because almost all the books which trended over the past couple of years have been bloody awful. My book club that I attend here in Edinburgh always falls victim to the hype. Every month a book is picked and it makes me want to slam my head into a wall. And the recommender of the book always says, well, they heard it was brilliant on TikTok, and then a month later we're all surprised to find out it was mediocre at best and goddamn awful at worst. And basically I'm always the one attending monthly book club meetings just for the company and for some of the snacks sometimes, because they have good crisps. But usually I just end up skipping the book entirely, because with my limited energy levels thanks to my stress-related illnesses, the last thing I'm going to use any of my precious energy for is reading Coco Mellors or Colleen Hoover. Sorry, not sorry. However, I can't really blame TikTok. I think this has been a thing for a long time. I think the buy one get one half price tables at bookshops always lure people into reading the strangest mixture of books of wildly varying quality, whilst smaller indie publishers who select kind of like brilliant, lesser-known writers who can't afford to offer heavy discounts on their publications get left behind on the main shelves completely unnoticed and rarely, if ever, ordered in bulk. And that's one of the key problems, okay? However, social media hype around books is not new, and I remember the first and last time I ever fell for social media book hype myself. So we're going back 20 years. It's 2004, and 13-year-old Cinzia went to her local bookshop to find the book that all the cool emo kids were taking photographs of on Tumblr. It was called Crank by Ellen Hopkins. So Crank is a byword for crystal meth, for anyone unfamiliar, and it's the first of a novel series focusing on the relationship between a mother and her addict daughter. And this story is loosely related to Hopkins' own relationship with her spiralling teenage daughter, with whom she did not have a relationship with at the time she wrote this series. Now, contrary to what you may presume, the book is not written from the mother's perspective, but from the daughter's, which, yes, makes me feel really uneasy on behalf of the real-life daughter this book is based on. I know I certainly wouldn't be okay with my estranged mother writing about and profiting from my trauma, addiction, and her projections and assumptions about my lived experience, feelings, and innermost thoughts. Additionally, Hopkins writes herself into the book as the hero mother who was always right and was ignored by the daughter, which, yes, also gave me incredibly icky vibes, even when I'm reading it as a 13-year-old girl. I too would be estranged from my mother about this, with or without a drug addiction. She'd be gone. And I remember reading this and feeling really uneasy, even as a 13-year-old. Like, the author was manipulating me and forcing me to feel a certain way and think a certain way. The personal history and agenda were seeping from this book. And the nail in the coffin for me was the anti-abortion messaging. It kind of just tipped me over the edge. And at the end of the day, I remember like putting the book away and feeling really betrayed and lied to. And I kept thinking, like, why would anyone have recommended this to me? My trust in the internet felt broken at age 13. Now, obviously, this is me personalising the internet. Just because I did not enjoy a book does not mean thousands of other people did not love it. However, I haven't had much luck when it comes to hyped up literature, and I found myself on a similar path ever since. I've kind of stopped trusting any trending books or popular books, which is probably to my detriment. But I made the mistake a few years ago when I listened to a few booktubers who insisted that Babel was incredible, and if you read my Goodreads review, you know how passionately I disagreed with that. But that doesn't mean I'm always right in eschewing popular literature. You know, had I not read The Secret History 12 years ago now, long before it became trending book on social media, I would have missed out on one of the best books I ever read. But had I approached it now, I probably would have thought, ugh, don't trust that, it's trending on social media. But in an interesting way, I didn't find The Secret History on social media or through recommendation. I found it whilst I was browsing the shelves of a library, and I even have a photograph of the moment before I found it. It was on the opening day of the new Birmingham Library. I had a lot of privilege when finding books that interested me in my terms, because when you work in a bookshop for 5 years and you spend 35 hours a week shelving books, you find some gems. And you have enough time to browse. You have more than enough time to browse. Just talking about it really upsets me. I miss that job so much. I swear to God, if anyone out there wants to hire me for a bookshop, I'll take the job in a heartbeat. I swear to God. Unless any multimillionaire out there just happens to be watching this channel and is interested in investing in my own bookshop venture, call me. I can't pay you back and never will pay you back. It's the worst investment you'll ever make, but I'll be happy. Now, I believe social media has proven incredibly positive in more ways than not. I'm saying it in the book world. You see, per Publisher Weekly, adult fiction books saw an increase in 8.5% in sales in 2022, and the 2022 Publishers Association research stated that BookTok is overwhelmingly a factor in Gen Z reading habits. In a poll of more than 2,000 16 to 25-year-olds, almost 59% said that BookTok had helped them discover a passion for reading. The report says, quote, BookTok and book influencers significantly influence what choices this audience make about what they read, with 55% of respondents saying that they turn to the platform for book recommendations. Now, whilst I think it's awesome that more people are reading, the latter fact got me thinking. The increase in literature is something to be celebrated, but is there a benefit to everyone reading the same thing? Have we become too reliant and vulnerable to manipulation and algorithms to discover what we want to read? And have people gained or lost confidence in finding literature that they would like by themselves, or even criticising the status quo? So unlike booksellers and librarians, book influencers online can be pretty strategic about what they promote, because certain books will benefit them. So if a book is trending or in the news, talking about it in some way will benefit their status, their views and business, even if it's not their usual read. So with that in mind, how can we trust book recommendations on social media when algorithms can be unpredictable or completely manipulated, thus forcing or accidentally pushing certain books into the trending sphere, which would in turn inspire highly influential BookTokers or Bookstagrammers to look into them, potentially not out of genuine literary interest, but as part of a strategic move to increase their follower and view count? How can we trust the quality of trending books when people who push the trend may do so to profit or benefit from promoting said books, or could even be paid a wad of money to falsify interest or passion for the text? Now, I don't think we have to be too worried about book influencers and being paid off. I may be naive in my belief here, but I still think most book influencers are not paid for their discussions at all. I've read a handful of people who get paid to review books, but the vast majority of us don't. We just receive a free copy in exchange for a review. However, that authenticity of all book reviewers reviewing something can actually make paid marketing more undetectable in the book world. I've been approached by numerous authors over the years to promote their books in exchange for a fee, but I always turn that down. Now imagine I were paid by an author to promote a book, and I slotted that promotion within a collection of my normal reads. Because I review books for free, normally no one would think my positive review of a paid book would be any less genuine than the other 7 I reviewed for free. But authors obviously don't want to pay people to review their books. Honestly, more likely than not, they want people to be paid to review their books positively. And were I paid to share my opinion, I may feel inclined to kind of sugarcoat my review or even lie about how good I found the book, depending on the sum of money I was paid, which is why I stayed far away from any paid promotions of individual authors. There's always going to be a technical added pressure to review something positively if an author or a publisher paid for the review. But that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that paid reviews should be avoided entirely, because if you're getting paid to promote something you genuinely enjoy, that is an ultimate win for influencers. It's a trickier path to cross with books unless you're already a fan of the author before being approached. But for example, nothing would be out of the norm for a fantasy book reader who's got a big following and loves the Game of Thrones to be paid to promote the latest book to their audience or the latest TV series in this hypothetical world, because that integration would be incredibly natural, and hell yes, get that coin for something you love. So I'm not saying paid reviews should not be trusted, but we can see where algorithms and also influencers can sway what people understand about certain books quite easily with a teeny tiny bit of coin or a teeny tiny bit of legs up and things like that, or a teeny tiny bit of networking, that can sway how people review something on social media. So the kind of publicity that's created on social media can be manufactured, because we still see algorithms and influencers determining the books people read far more than traditional retailers and publishers would. So, for example, you go into a bookshop and there will be a table where you see a load of books on it, and it goes, books that you've seen on BookTok. And those tables in shops like Barnes & Noble and Waterstones are far more successful in the shops than a table of staff recommended reads. Now, why does the weight of social media presence inspire us to trust the quality of the books on that table more than the staff recommendations? Again, imagine you're on your favourite bookshop website, and there's a page on the bookshop website titled Staff Picks, and then another page on there saying Trending Books Online. Which page would you be more entitled to click? Or which one do you think would be more popular by the public? Most likely, in my opinion, I'm guessing here, but I think the trending books page would have more clicks. Now, this may be because the person clicking, ironically, would trust TikTok and social media recommendations more, despite being algorithmically driven, often with many of the books appearing on the list being created by potentially false hype, determined by how much money a publisher was willing to put into that book. Or additionally, the influencer or social media recommendations appearing more authentic and organic than bookseller ones. Because bookseller recommendations are often still interpreted as book recommendations that are in the system and thus have an agenda. Both website pages of book recommendations are determined by anonymous people. You have no greater relationship with the TikTok recommenders than you do the booksellers, but the former is kind of sexier and more modern than the latter. People are far more suspicious of big organisations such as Waterstones or Blackwell's or Barnes & Noble for biases and agendas than they have social media. Because, despite social media apps having massive multi-billion-dollar conglomerates masterminded by algorithms out of hands of everyday people and are instead dictated by billionaires with shady political alliances. But still, they will trust it more because the mass presence of the everyday man on these platforms, like you and I, sell the idea of authenticity of the everyday person versus big billionaire tycoons, and thus bookseller picks won't pull as numbers as an influencer will. There's also a sense of tribalism that comes with reading what everyone else is reading. There's a kind of sense of community. It's like a worldwide book club where everyone can be a member. So why pick a book to read that's from some faceless bookseller on a website or even a shop that they gave you when you can read what millions of people out there are talking about and connect with them? But here's my biases again. Maybe, as someone who is both a bookseller and an influencer in the book world, you can really trust a bookseller's recommendations as much, if not more, than a lot of social media trends. Because my favourite question as a bookseller was when someone asked me, just came up to me and said, can you give me a book recommendation? Because it was like being a personal shopper for 20 minutes. I used to figure out what that person liked based on their interests and their reading history, and then I would tailor all my recommendations from that information. And then oftentimes it became sort of a team sport. So I would tag up with another bookseller in the shop because they potentially liked a different genre than what I would read. So I'd go up to another bookseller and went, oh, this sci-fi bookseller here will help you find out based on your interests. So it was kind of like personal selling one-on-one that you don't get from in social media recommendations. It's kind of a mass popular thing rather than what would you really like. Also, booksellers read insane amounts, and often we know a hell of a lot about books that we haven't read purely because we have that one colleague in the shop who doesn't shut up about a particular book, that it becomes part of your own recommendation repertoire because you know so much about the bloody book. And yet, going back to the bookshop, the worst days in my bookshop were during a period when trending books of the month became forced upon us. There was this period where we as booksellers were forced to hand sell the book of the month. I still think it's there, but I don't think it's as intense as it used to be, because when it was introduced, we were forced to tell every single customer who came to our till and try to convince them to read this book. And it was such a contrived recommendation. From some kind of high above in London. God knows how it was determined, but the books were often drivel or something none of us read. None of us had any interest in reading. There was the odd one that was good, but most of us didn't want to be. We felt like we were forced to read this book and then forced to pitch it to every customer, regardless if the customer looked like the target audience for the book, we were still expected to sell it to them, and we get told off if we did not. We literally had a daily quota of how many of these books of the month we had to sell. And then the management in my bookshop was keeping a tally of how many of these books we were selling, each bookseller. And then there were like rewards at the end of the week or end of the day based on which bookseller sold the most of this one book. And it was really degrading and really fake. And maybe I speak for just myself, but I know a lot of my colleagues at the time always felt the same. We hated every moment of it. Enforcing behaviours like that from booksellers around a decade ago now only aided the public's loss of trust in booksellers and large bookshop organisations, because it completely undermined the organic nature of recommending books that many of us had come into the job to do. We wanted to encourage people to read. That's why we were there. We wanted to read and talk about books and encourage people to read and get people their right book. It was like matchmaking with their little books. We were just little paper matchmakers. But anyway, back to social media. How many times do I say that? Take a shot. So if book influencers are not paid to promote books, how do some books trend online? Why does everyone seemingly start recommending or talking about the same book? After all, a world of advanced copies and proofs is not new or unique. So which proofs make waves online? Well, I like to take a look at the case study of perhaps one we're all familiar with. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Hoover's It Ends With Us was originally published in 2016. However, it became a meteoric sensation on TikTok in 2021. Now, Hoover's book was never an unpopular book or unknown, because back in 2016, it was New York Times bestseller because the book sold around 21,000 copies in the first month of its release, according to Publishers Weekly. But then, in 2021, the Washington Post reported that her print unit sales soared 693% higher than in 2020, and It Ends With Us sold a total of 768,700 copies a year. That equates to $13 million of sales. Now, at the time, TikTok videos with the hashtag of It Ends With Us garnered more than 2 billion views in total. Now, notably, the trend around her book seemed to be less about reviewing the book, and instead inspired by trends of TikTok involving people showing themselves before they read the book and then after they read the book, i.e. they were an emotional mess. So they were happy and like, I'm going to read this book, and then they shot a picture of themselves just crying or sobbing. So the question is, was the book a trend because everyone loved the book? Or was the book a trend because people wanted to take part in a TikTok trend that was more popular and trending? Because we know how this works. People who want to take part in a trend have to do their thing. They have to buy the Stanley Cup. They have to use the trending audio. They have to learn the dance. They have to try the challenge, etc. So did people who read about the book show it on social media because they wanted everyone else to go read the book, because it changed their lives, or they loved it? Or did they do it because they wanted to hop on a bandwagon and get some of the kind of attention and clout that came from jumping on a trending theme and topic and become part of a popular movement, i.e. the before I read the book and after I read the book trend? Honestly, we'll never know. But considering how many videos showcasing the book do so, with the book serving primarily as a prop for the influencer to showcase themselves in some matter, rather than discussing the book in depth. So it'd be like more of a quick list of books that ruined my life or books that made me cry, rather than a discussion of the content of the book. There's a possibility that the book became an easy hashtag for people to launch themselves off of, and the overwhelming presence of the book resulted in more people becoming curious and then reading the book for themselves. Now, this does not make the popularity of the book contrived or even inorganic, but it does beg the question: what constitutes a book recommendation? You see, the idea of a book recommendation seems to have evolved in the world of social media. Now, you only have to see an interesting video or a beautiful photograph of the book to spark intrigue in another person, not a deep analysis or discussion of the book. And this kind of picture-perfect recommendation, this visual recommendation rather than verbal or written, is only aided more by publishers leaning into it, by designing books that are curated for the algorithm with their sprayed edges and beautiful designs and multiple different copies which all look fantastic in a photo or video, because it's no longer really about what people say about the book, but it's all about if they can convince people to show their book in their content. Similarly, publishers respond to the genre or style of TikTok recommended books. And they will prioritise TikTok-friendly tropes over innovation, from the enemies to lovers tropes to knockoffs of Akutar, which is a court of thorns and roses for those unfamiliar. And tens upon tens of feminist myth retellings that just keep getting regurgitated over and over again. So while social media may have been a tool to inspire millions to read and buy more books, the more reliant people are on social media for receiving book recommendations, the more repetitive we will see the market become. It will be less about discovering new writers and raising up new talent, and more about regurgitating comfort reads and things people find familiar and liked the first time, or quick publications of texts, the same authors being promoted again and again and again. And all this dilution will probably push many publishers and authors to potentially turn to AI written content, because the content inside the books is mattering less and less in the age of social media. As long as it ticks off a few boxes and has a pretty cover and we can make money off it, what does it matter what it says inside? Is that too negative content? I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about recently. I was like, really? Maybe I'll talk about it. So I'd love to hear your opinions down below. Share them all. I'd love to hear all about it. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, or even, joining my Patreon, or leaving a comment down below. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Speaking of patrons, thank you all so much for supporting my content as always. And I will see you soon for another video. Remember, be happy and healthy, and books save lives. So keep reading.